first thing we notice is that this is, as I said before, a continuation of this vision of John's, which began with chapter 12, where we saw the woman and the dragon. And although now those two characters sort of fade into the background and the vision develops, we don't see the woman now, the church, the people of God. She is being protected. The dragon now sort of passes on authority to these two beasts. And so we now see John's depiction of the outworking of what we read in chapter 12 and verse 17. The dragon was enraged and went off to make war against the rest of her offspring. So what we now see is this sort of cosmic battle between good and evil now comes to being an earthly conflict, an outworking of this same struggle. And what we see is this includes the Christians in Asia to whom John writes. We see the emerging of these two beasts, the first with 10 horns, 7 heads, and 10 crowns on his horns and blasphemous names on the heads. The second with 2 horns, looks like a lamb, speaks like a dragon. And we also see the verse that has caused so much speculation over history, this number of the beast. And so what are we to make of all of this? And what did John's first readers make of all of this? Well, the first thing we see, as I said just a moment ago, as we move into chapter 13, is this sort of cosmic and spiritual conflict between good and evil, God and Satan, where we see the woman and the dragon. It now moves to what we might describe as the local or the earthly conflict between those who are the agents of good and evil. We see the beast and we see those who have the name of God upon them. And through those, so what we see is that it's the people now through whom these spiritual powers or forces are at work. And so we see the dragon, Satan, gives his power to the first beast, which then cascades to the second beast. So let's try and just sort of tease out, and I'll just give an overview, and then as we sort of lead into discussion, we can explore some of these things further. So just sort of tease out some of the symbolism that John is using. This description of the first beast in verses 1 to 7 draws really heavily upon Daniel's Old Testament vision in Daniel chapter 7. It's quite a long chapter, so we're not going to read that this morning, but you might want to, if you're interested, have a look at Daniel chapter 7 and sort of run the two alongside each other. So Revelation 13 and Daniel chapter 7, just to see the similarities and just how much John draws from Daniel. And as with Daniel, so too with John, the beast represents human rule. And for those first readers in these 7 churches in Asia, almost certainly Roman rule. Although many people would agree that with John's focus upon the beast as a whole, what John is looking at is not just specifically, what Daniel does is he looks at sort of the specific heads and horns. John's sort of description is the beast as a whole. Then some commentators would suggest that what John is doing is he's not simply saying that this is the threat of the Roman Empire, which claims what only God can claim. And we've seen this in Revelation already. The emperors seeing themselves as gods. Rome at that time looking to sort of have world domination. Their offer of universal peace, of Pax Romana, and so on. All these things coming out of Rome, which in a sense is what God claims to offer and can, and here's the Roman Empire claiming to offer them but can't. But what John is also saying is that this is the threat from any human empire or system which makes the same claims. Satan's power at work through human beasts, empires, or systems of rule which seek to undermine or even to destroy all that is good, all that is of God. And we see at the time, as John writes, how people were captivated by this. They were titillated by this. They were fascinated by it. And so they followed this system, this empire. And what we see is that this system or empire was anti-Christian. It was against the church. History shows us, and it's interesting, it talks about sort of, the temple being desecrated and all these things. And actually, history of the time would show us how Seleucid, one of the Roman rulers, allowed pigs to be sacrificed in the temple, this sort of desecration of the temple. And he did that for 3.5 years. And we see how John links those times. And then the Maccabees were able then, after that period, they came and they rededicated the temple. And so we see this beast being affiliated to sort of human system and rule. And then we see this second beast, smaller and so less powerful, but having the authority of the first beast. Here, John, some commentators suggest John is making reference to the relationship between Asia at the time and the Roman Empire. Asia looked to build an imperial temple. It sought to give honor to the emperor and to Rome. And in turn, Rome gave to Asia imperial power over the region. And then we see this second beast performs miracles. We're not sure of the content of these miracles or the detail of them. We see sort of fire falls from heaven. But what we see in that sense is the people were deceived. The great empire making great promises which come to nothing. And then everyone is given this mark without which there is exclusion. Without the mark, they can't trade, they can't participate in society. And we might say, well, that's a bit far-fetched, but actually in some of one or two cities in China, sort of IT cities, people are forced to have and to carry with them a mobile phone. They are tracked and monitored by the state, and much of their sort of transactional sort of interaction is via the mobile phone. And then we come to this, the name or the number of the beast. And sometimes people say John is being secretive here, but actually what John is doing is being revealing. He's revealing this. He wants people to know. Some suggest he's written it as a number to avoid Romans reading this letter as it travels on its way around, so to avoid incrimination. And over time, people have tried with various sort of number systems. They've tried to calculate and to apply this to the lives of people throughout history. So I think Napoleon at one point was identified. His name was calculated as this number. Hitler also has had his name calculated as this number. And they've used number systems of their time. But what does John mean is what we have to ask. Who is it being applied to? And again, we've already seen John would not be aware of Hitler and things like this. So we have to try and look at it in its context. And at the time, in both Hebrew and in Greek, each letter of the alphabet corresponded to a number. And there was this sort of what's termed gematria. We get sort of geometrical from it, equal sides and things like this. So gematria in the Hebrew, where the corresponding numbers for a name could then be added together. And you would work out, so this is my name, the letters of my name, and I take all the corresponding numbers and it gives me a number for my name. And so with the known names and the corresponding sort of the alphabet and the corresponding numbers of the time, most sort of sensible commentaries suggest that 666 equates to Nero Caesar. But also using the same number sequence and the same alphabet, 666 equates to beast. And so we see that link. And so most commentators who are not trying to be sort of, fanciful, as it were, suggest that what John is saying is that Nero, who started this intense persecution of the Christian church, is the beast. And in all of these, when we see the beast and it's got all these heads and horns and crowns, it's representative of subsequent emperors who will come and who will sort of carry on this sort of persecution of the church. Also, commentators would suggest too that the number 7 is a number of perfection. Number 6, 1 less, is imperfection. And so that 3 times repetition is emphasis. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord. We've seen that already. And so 666 is total depravity, total imperfection. Now, I'll stop there. That's, like I say, a very brief overview, and we'll see what comes up in our sort of discussion. I'm sure it's going to have